Welcome to Pack Sports. Our interview this week is with Steve Calechman. Did I pronounce it right,
They're
Steve?
pretty close. Calechman's
Okay.
good. That was good,
Who,
Mark.
right. Who,
You
Steve,
got like it was a single. I'll say that. It was a good single.
single. Okay. It may be a bunt. As they say, in the scorebook, it looks the same.
Oh,
Something,
yeah, there's no pictures in the scorebook. Yeah,
yeah, a single against the Green Monster or a bunt are the same thing.
sure.
But anyway, I came across Steve because he wrote a wonderful article a few years ago on T-ball. So, Steve, welcome to Pack Sports. I want to get right into it.
Hello.
Reading your article, you
Uh,
mentioned there's too much inactivity in T-ball. Give me your ideas and how could this be resolved?
yeah. Well, first, I mean, look, I coached. My kids are younger. I coached t-ball for many seasons, and it's like it's everything the kid doesn't want to do. It's like stand here and wait for a ball that's never going to come to you, and be patient and don't move around. And what kids want to do is they want to like, what's the biggest thing about t-ball is breaking up wrestling matches, and they're all going to go for the ball, and they're all going to converge on each other. So that was the biggest thing. They just had at that time they just wanted energy to get it out. I think. Well, there's two things. One is how to fix t-ball, and the biggest thing is just not to have it. I don't think at that age it's better to have them do scavenger hunts or obstacle courses or something like that. But within the game itself, I mean, one year we had them, everybody got a home run. They just hit and ran around the bases. Forget about waiting on the bases. That's how we did it. I mean, we did stuff to minimize the wrestling and the tackling. One
Let
year we had tackle jail.
Yeah, now in your article, you mentioned that
Yeah.
you instituted something called the I formation defense. Could you describe
Yes, I invented. Yes.
what that is exactly?
Yeah. What I found was, in the field, what was tough is balls would only go to certain places. And whenever there was a ground ball, there would be about five kids tackling each other to try and get the ball. So I decided I was going to line up everybody on the pitching mound in a straight line, and everybody was going to get their chance to field the ball. So it was their time. So nobody else was going to tackle them and then throw it to first. And what I did was then I had other balls with me, and I'd throw them into the outfield for the other kids if they wanted to run and get them. And they all did. They all like just wanted to chase down balls. So that's how it probably looked like a mess, if you were
Right.
witnessing it,
Yeah.
but it kept them moving and kept them doing something. So
And you were up in Newton,
Newton, Massachusetts.
Newton, Massachusetts,
Yeah.
the Little League there. So when you did T-ball, how many times did you practice a week and how many games were in the season? About.
Yeah. I think there probably were about, I don't know, there might have been 8 or 9 games. We had like maybe one, max two practices. There were no practices. It was right at the beginning of the year. Maybe we had one practice and then went right into games.
Okay, when you practice, were they 45 minutes? Were they an hour and a half? How long was it? And
No, it was. I think the whole thing was about an hour.
about an hour. How
Yeah,
did you structure the practice? Was it just you and the whole team, or did you divide up with your assistant coaches? I'm
I
just
divided into groups.
okay.
I would. Let's see. I think that you know what I did, and it sort of evolved. The first thing I would do with the kids is I would have them. We would just run around the bases. They would follow me,
Right.
and just to let them know, okay, this is the order, of you go. And I would call it, okay, this is first base, this is second base, and we would just run around the bases. And then we do some basic fielding where I would just start very slow with the kids, and I would just roll the ball, like do it with a partner, and roll the ball back and forth, and just I said, try to stop the ball.
Right.
Get down, try to stop the ball, roll it back. Um,
Did you find, I'm guessing you had 5 and 6 year olds and you had some returnees coming back.
yeah,
Was there a huge disparity in the skill level and then
yes.
divide up that way, like with an assistant coach? Were you able to
I
function?
didn't, again, the first practice was like, it was the only thing we did. I don't think it really got into like skill that the disparity came in that much. There are certain kids that like had a handle on the game and they always had it, and then I
Right.
coached them later in baseball, and they were good baseball players. They had a handle on the game. You have kids at every level. And some are like, okay, they're really good at this. They really want to play t-ball. And some are like, okay, I'm playing t-ball because maybe my older sibling did it or it's what I'm doing. And then there's others that, okay, this is an activity that we're signing you up for. And so you deal with everything. And there's kids who are really focused and there are kids who are just all over the place. And you just sort of make it work. So for the drills, it was rolling ball back and forth. Um, I think we started, yeah, we did a little hitting practice and then maybe some coaches, we divide them up into the outfield and maybe do some throwing there. I'll tell you one thing I did with them. I think I
Just
did
to,
at the beginning
just to make sure
one time.
you would use the
I'm sorry.
soft balls, right? When you did
Yeah,
the drills. Okay, go ahead.
yeah. I did this I decided to get them to learn how to run. I had them as a team challenge. I had them run around the bases as like a relay race, and I timed and they all went around. And then at the end, I told them their time, and I thought I was just going to do it once, and I just wanted to see what happened. And they said, "Well, do you want to see if you want to beat your time?" And they go, "Yeah." So we did it a couple times, and one, it was a good thing of just getting them warmed up, getting them to learn how to run around the bases. Also, was a way to get them tired. So, and then I think another time we had it like two teams. We would do it reverse. One would go the regular way, one would go the other way. So they go third they'd go third around to home, and one would do the traditional first around to home, and
Yeah.
we'd have like a relay race that way.
Okay.
Um,
Let me ask you one more question, then I want to get into your background
yeah,
and
yeah,
we'll go from there. And I've read a few things that you wrote, and
hmm
you're of the opinion maybe we shouldn't have T-ball, but the question is, you can tell me if that's true or not. But let's say we are having T-ball. Are there
yeah.
one, two, or three things that you would change with your kids' league about T-ball, or youth baseball, youth sports in general?
Well, that's a different. Like, well, I'd say those are two different things. The baseball and the t-ball. There's such a division. I'll say the t-ball is through the rec department, which is that's a totally different organizational thing.
Right.
Um, is there something I would change about t-ball in and of itself? I don't know how much you can change t-ball. That where it is. I mean, I did stuff. I did things that got emails that like the day after of reminding people what not to do. Like I think the throwing balls in the outfield they didn't really love. I pitched like from the first game if kids wanted to get pitched to, I would pitch to them. And they said, wait till the third game to do that. So I was like, I think I got a few emails about what I was trying to do. I'm not answering your question really about what I would do to change T-ball. I don't know. Um,
Yeah. Well,
No, I don't know what there is. I did things within it. Like one thing we did was, and I got this from another coach.
sure.
We put the dots, the circular, like the silicone dots, and I had them stand on a dot. We just put them all through the field. And so you start a new dot, play happens. It's like, okay, go back to your dot. So it sort of gave them a position of where to stand and not to sort of roam around and crash. That's what we did. But
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. I'll make it easy.
yeah,
What do you think is the maximum number of games they should play in T-ball in the course
you
of
know, I
maybe?
think six is good.
Okay.
Seven. I think that's a good amount.
Right.
Um,
All right. Good. And just,
Yeah,
and I assume,
I understood what it was. It was an hour of me of observing your kids for an hour and letting them run around and try to have some fun. My philosophy is very simple.
right.
Everybody, uh, everybody has when nobody gets hit with a bat. That was basically it. And my thing was, I want you to come back. I want you to have fun, so you come
Right.
back.
That's the goal. And it's funny, Steve, and by the way, we're talking to Steve Calechman, and I hope I pronounced that right. We're going to get into
Yep.
your background, but you wrote a very nice article in the Boston Globe. And one of the things you said something
hmm
that parents want something scheduled for their kids with someone else in charge. And
Yeah.
I think that's very telling. And I think the generational thing, I know you're a bit younger than me, but there's a thing that my wife and I were always against overschedule. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of times parents do overschedule because they want someone else. And I say the word babysit, whether it's piano lessons, whether it's karate, whether
Yeah.
it's t-ball. So I thought that was a very telling quote from you in that article.
Oh, I'm with you. Look, we can get into the other conversation about do I think there's enough pickup game? No, I don't think kids play enough pickup games. I think everything's scheduled, and that look, that's a bigger
Right.
socioeconomic issue of like parents' time and can they be around? Do they need to get into things? I do think there's a part of it like it's not official unless it's sort of an organized league, and that's a little bit of a
Yes.
I'm not big on that. I'd love to see kids just like make
Right.
up a game and play it. And I think most kids, they'll figure it out. You know, they're not there to argue. They're there to play a game. So,
Yeah. I want to get
yeah.
into that. I just want to mention to the audience, get into your background. I
Hmm.
found Steve Calechman scanning the internet, and I think it was through your website through, was it Harvard Health? I'm
I
not-
did do, yeah. I'm a freelance writer, so I write for a bunch of places, and
Okay,
I've written for Harvard Health, and in the past, I wrote for Men's Health, and I write for the Boston Globe and Boston Magazine. So I write a lot. And I've written a lot. I wrote for Fatherly a long time, so I've written a lot about parenting stuff, and essentially, I've always written about whatever's going on in my life. I figured someone else might
right.
care too. So.
And just to mention too, and I want to ask you a little bit of your background, stevekalechman.com. It's a wonderful website. The name Steve, Calechman.com. And what I
Yeah.
enjoy about it, Steve, seriously, a guy like me that still has a concentration span like your T-ball team, the
Yeah.
articles you wrote were short and to the point, and that's what I
Yeah.
love. But
Thank you.
give the audience, and I'm going to mention too, you had another great quote, which I could get to at the very end, how grandparents get a mulligan when they have a kid. I thought that was a wonderful quote.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay.
tell the audience a little bit about Steve and your background, what you've done, what you're doing now, and how you ended up getting into T-ball. But go ahead. You could even, start from college or whatever, where you were brought up.
Yeah. I went to college. I grew up in, just outside Boston, and then I went to college at the University of Wisconsin. And then, one of the big things I got into improv comedy when I was there, just because it was something fun to do, and I started doing a little bit more after college. And I had a sort of two-track thing. Got me into performing. Did stand-up comedy, but I also was a writer, and so I'm a journalist. So I wrote for newspapers, and then became a freelancer where I've written mostly for magazines. So I was performing for a while. I don't do that as much, but that kind of gets into my writing too. But I wrote a lot, as I said, for Men's Health. So I've written a lot about whatever sort of affects a person's life and try to make it better. So there's always a takeaway. And it's always been about you write about what you know, and it's always what's going on in my life. And before one time it was being single and, you know, living that life. And then I got married and then had kids. So it sort of evolved into a lot of parenting stuff. And I got into T-ball because my kids were okay. I guess let's try T-ball, and they were willing to try it. So, and I knew with all those leagues, they're run because people volunteer, and I was like, okay, this is the way. I don't mind doing it. I don't mind, giving my time, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I like doing. It's the best way to watch a T-ball game is to coach it. It's like it's not boring that way. I can't. I've never watched a T-ball game, so I
Right.
don't really know
Sure.
what it's like.
Did you coach after T-ball in
Yeah, I went. Yeah, I coached baseball. My older son plays it a little bit more. My younger son did 1 year. I coached both of their teams at one time. 1 year, I coached both of their teams. Um,
and
and I'm also coaching.
the phone never stopped ringing, I'm sure, when you coach both.
I've always been an assistant coach, so I don't get the phone calls and the questions. So I kind of like the backup catcher. I have the best job. And then I'm coaching my older son coaching basketball and sort of help out with my younger son's team too. So
Okay.
um,
You're
I've
well
I've stayed in. I'm not one of the I'd say professional coaches in my town, but
right.
I do a little bit.
You're well diverse in everything you do, Steve. You have a great
But
resume.
Marty, I got to say this too, and I know you've coached a long time. I always worry that I'm one of those coaches that is that isn't love, like, the well-intentioned dad who might not know a ton like that. I fall more into that because I played sports and I sort of understand them, but I certainly, maxed out, at not a high level. So I always wonder, I hope I'm doing some good for them. Uh, that's always the word.
I'm sure you are, and
Yeah.
you'll see dividends in a few years
Yeah.
when somebody might stop you in Cleveland Circle and say, "Hey, Coach Steve, how are you?" and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
You look at him and say, "Who are you?" Because that
Yeah.
happens to me all the time at the local gym.
Right.
But let's get back into the T-ball. You know,
Yeah.
Steve, years ago, and again, I'm a bit older than you. If I wanted to go down to an elementary school in Newton, Mass, that was 20 minutes from my house, and I'm 10, 11 years old. My parents, they wouldn't mind at all. But in today's world, unfortunately, parents have a lot of worrying to do, the safety of the kids. And what I'm getting to is, what do you think the balance is with structured and unstructured play for kids and what it should be at this point, taken away where kids can't just go on their own down to the local school?
That's a great question. I think it's more than it is. I mean, I think I'd love to see more unstructured play. I think um, we try to do it, we're probably more careful than we should be.
Right,
And Mike, with everything I'd say with kids, it's like you have to know your kids. I mean, it's like some kids are going to be much more adventurous and much more willing to go out. And I think some kids are going to be less willing to go out. And I don't think that's something, there's not one solution. And so, uh, it, like just a parent who writes about stuff. I'm no expert. I have to sort of say that. So like it's not enough to say like yes, go to the field and work it out because I think some kids that's maybe too much for them. But for us, it's like we find ways. I at least find ways. Okay, here's let's start with some independence, and if it's just taking them over, to the JCC at free play and say, okay, I'm sitting in the lobby, I'm here. Go into the gym and go at it. And
right.
that's a sort of step in the right direction. But
Do,
I'd love them to go on their bikes and go, bother the town. Um,
right. We do.
but
Yeah, I know.
so my answer, I don't know if I have an answer. What's the balance? I think it's more than it is.
Right,
Um, but it goes back to the other thing. It's how scheduled are they? Do they have somewhere to be? you
right,
know, I know my oldest son's going to get together with one of the friends after school because it's the day they don't have anything. So,
right. But you
yeah.
do think that, and we all love unstructured playtime,
Yeah.
but I also think there's a place for structure. And do you think
Oh,
there's,
yeah.
but
Well, yeah, you get the structure, you get the fundamentals, and then you bring them in. Yeah, you have some fun. I think uh I've always thought, I sometimes the biggest problem sometimes with organized sports is, the parents get in the way, not in a bad way. I mean, I think you need the parents, but kids can figure it out and have fun, and they, make up rules, and it
right.
makes no sense, but it makes sense to them, and they have fun. So,
You had a very good quote in that Boston Globe article from
yeah,
I guess it was a Jay Cohn, and he said that coaches get in the way of fun, which
yeah.
I thought is very telling also. I think that's an excellent quote. When you coached, I know when I coached, there were a ton of funny things that happened.
Hmm.
And I remember we had a lefty kid, Larry, and he was the only lefty batter. And when he would hit the ball, he would run to third base, second base, and first base. With the
Right.
thought process that that's where I have to go because everybody goes the other
Yeah.
way. We had really had to work on him. But can you think of any funny things that happened in your times of coaching T-ball?
Y- Yeah. Well, there was a time where I didn't know where one kid was, and then they said, "Oh, he's right over there," and he was relieving himself on a tree. And I go, "Look," but it's like he was five. I go, "That's what you do when you five. There's
Right,
nothing wrong with that." And
right,
you got to go.
yeah,
So that was good. There were repeated requests to lie down, and I said, "Sure, go ahead." It's 5:30 on a Thursday and you're tired. It's like you want to lie down, go
Right.
ahead. Um, that the thing I did with the I formation when I throw balls into the outfield, most kids loved it. And I asked one of the other players, I said, "You want me to throw you a ball?" And she looked at me and she goes, "No, I'm not a dog." And
Oh, right.
I go, "Oh, you picked up on the whole thing, haven't
Yeah.
you?" That was the whole thing. So those were the um
Yeah.
those were the funny things.
I always
Those were the
thought,
things that's
yeah, I always thought in T-ball, base running was always an adventure. No matter
oh
what you
yeah.
tell them, they would run to second base, sometimes first, like as a Larry would run to the third base. I always thought it was an adventure. But Steve, are we wasting our time in T-ball coaches trying to teach baseball skills at 5 and 6 years old? Honestly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let me
I'd say. What do you say, Marty?
I think you could teach some basic, very preliminary skills, and I've tried to institute like the Steve Calechman formula, like creative
Yeah.
things. For instance, some kids that were very shy and were not confident, and I developed something the first practice where I would buy a brand new bathroom plunger, put it in the tee, and put a kickball. So the chances of hitting the ball were always increased, and it
Oh,
was
that's good.
positive reinforcement. With that,
Yeah.
with that said, I agree with you that it's so limited. And what I try to tell coaches what to do also is try to have activities that they're familiar with and maybe have a baseball theme. So approach it like I think T-ball practices, you should approach it like it's 50% you're a phys ed teacher, 50% baseball. If you're
Yeah.
doing a relay race, have a baseball theme where they have a ball in their glove and they run around the cone and pass it. Do a red light, green light, one, two, three, but they holding a ball in a baseball glove. I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And as you said, Steve, you got to keep the practices short and, no more than 1 day a week. Let's face it, at 5 and 6, there's a certain limitation for like 95% of these
Oh
kids.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Maury, the one thing, this isn't so much T-ball. T-ball is a sort of finite, amount of time. More with baseball, what you mentioned is, I think one of the issues is there's not enough practice time. And I see it with basketball now, you know, there's only so much we can do in a game. And there's only so much we can do in practice too, but that's where we can sort of work on stuff. And with T-ball, I mean, in general, we had like one practice at the beginning of the year, and then it was the game time. So I I sort of agree, like I try to what did I want? I wanted every kid to have success, whatever that was. Especially the kids that I knew, like I want you to be able to hit a ball. We're gonna get you so you're gonna hit a ball by the end of the year and feel that. Um, and I find this T-ball and then the baseball, it's a tough game. It's a
Right,
tough game to get. There's a lot of coordination between the lower and the upper half, where you're really not moving the same way. It's a lot of coordination that kids don't have at that age.
right.
Um, so to try to break it down, and really with T-ball, the biggest thing is hitting the ball. There's not a lot of fielding going on. That's not an issue. So it's really trying to get them to hit. So I would try to, in my way, I'd stand behind the plate. I'd stand with them. I try to give them something like, see that tree out there? I want you to hit that tree. And if anything, I want them to go like that's how much I want you to swing. And so they're trying to really swing at it. You know, and they all hit it. That was the biggest success. When the kid who wasn't hitting it hit the ball, that felt good because maybe that makes them want to come back. And that's all as coaching young kids, that's really the main goal is you want them to like enjoy it enough to come back.
You,
So, and then as it gets older, I think there should be some more practices I'm seeing in basketball now. It's like, and with baseball especially, because baseball is a very, you're playing your individual position, and when you warm up, you say, okay, we're gonna hit, or we're doing ground balls, throw it over to first. Very A to B stuff, and they can do that. But then when the game starts, it's game speed, and then that's when you know, they lose their minds in a way.
I,
There's movement involved.
Yes.
And every sport's like that. And then they revert to like, okay, what do you know? Or what do you think? And then it sort of breaks down. So that's hard. It's really hard. It takes repetitions.
Yes.
You got to play it, but you got to practice it too. So my thing is always, I'd love a little more practice time, but
Yeah, I agree. And when I coached, my thing was practices. But the one thing you said, Steve, is great. By the way, we're talking to Steve
yeah.
Calechman, and he's a terrific guy. The goal is fun, and you want the kids to come back next year. And I'll tell you, when I first started, I thought,
Mari, so can I pause you for a second? I
sure,
want them back next week. I mean, there could be dropout that even smaller. Like, I want you to have fun. Like, oh, that was pretty good. Oh,
right,
that wasn't too hard. And for some kids, look, for my kids, I'll say that, my kids are not high on the skill level. I
right,
have a different perspective. My kids are not the star athletes. So I have the different perspective of those kids. Like, I want those kids to be involved. I want them to know you can do something. You're a part of this team and not just t-ball, but with everything, it's like the stress some kids feel about like having to do something and do well. It's like, no, we're gonna, you know what? It's okay. And we
right.
always tell them, we're gonna miss it. We're gonna make mistakes. It's okay. We're
Yeah,
gonna try it again and we're gonna get it.
yeah. You mentioned
Sorry, I didn't mean to
that's
cut you off.
okay, but it's funny. You just mentioned something stress level. Just to relate, I always thought it was kind of overdone where they would our league or a lot of leagues would have tryouts and these kids moving up to what we our league was called the major league level and they see these stern looking adults on the third base line with clipboards. I say, boy, that's so intimidating. Just move back a little, give these kids space. But I wanted to ask you, Steve,
Yeah.
because you did coach a little afterwards, and we're covering T-ball, but we're
Hmm.
also the net is a little big, which I appreciate. In youth baseball or softball, at what age do you think they should start playoffs?
5 years old.
No, you
No.
don't.
Um, I think, I think nine. Well, why not? I think 9 or 10. I think that makes whatever the age. I think 9 or 10 is makes sense. Whatever. I mean, they do the. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's pretty good.
Okay.
Whatever age that is. I think before that,
Right.
no.
Yeah. It becomes
Um,
like we would have in our league. I thought it was ridiculous. It became a game of, who had the most walks would win the game.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
it. And I'm guessing up in Newton, Mass. I know the area very well, and I know that soccer is huge. And I'm
yeah.
guessing a lot of other youth sports, including hockey and baseball, as we say. What's your take? I don't know if you've ever experienced on travel sports or travel ball. Do you have an opinion on that?
Not, no. I mean, my kids have not gotten into travel ball. It's not for them, so I can't really speak to it. I know that there's tryouts for travel teams, and I do know that, for the baseball, even when they're, you know, 8 years old, they're almost building the league for the summer team, to compete. And I, I don't know I don't know. I don't know how much if the kids
Right,
enjoy it, great. I don't know. I mean, I don't know who it's for sometimes. And, um, my kids have just never
right.
wanted to pursue it that much. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm really much stayed on the town league. I don't do travel teams. I don't do club teams. That's a whole different rate. You want to cut, you want to do playing time. That's great. Where I'm at, equal playing time, and I'm all in
right.
I believe in town leagues, and there's never been pushback. It's all even. Everybody plays pretty much the same amount of time.
Sure. Yeah. All right, we're gonna wrap it up. A couple more questions, or
Yeah,
actually one big one I like glossed over, but when you coach, whether it's T-ball, whether it's your youth basketball team, or whether when you were assistant,
yeah.
did you have any sort of parents meeting? And was there at the beginning of the season, or were there any problems with the parents throughout the year?
No, no. T-ball, no. I never had a parents meeting with T-ball. Um, Mostly, because it was through the rec department, I couldn't contact the parents directly. So that was their structure. So I never had a meeting with them. And I was never been the head coach, so we've never had a parents meeting. And there
Could
might
I
be
could I
an
just
email at
interrupt
the
you?
beginning of the year.
I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah,
You were given a team, I guess 10, 11, or 12 kids, but you didn't have their phone number?
no. All the contact would go through the rec department. They would contact me. I could not, I wasn't, I couldn't I wasn't contacting them directly.
Interesting. And they had your phone number or no? The team.
No,
So how
no.
how would you guys do it? Like, let's say if during the day you had a game or a practice and it was like 4:20 and the clouds start coming over
The rec department sent emails all about that stuff, about whether I was finding out too with everybody else whether the game was going on. So
so they would determine that.
yeah,
Now,
they would contact all that stuff.
is this because of they didn't want any potential problems that they thought of? Because this is interesting. I have never heard of this.
Yeah, it'd be a guess. Why? I think they just controlled the communication. Whether they did, it was fine. It
Yeah,
wasn't like, I guess with this, it wasn't about like whether people, if kids didn't show up, it didn't affect the game. It didn't affect whether we're going to have the game or not. So
right.
they
Okay.
had their reasons for it, and I didn't. It wasn't one of those. It wasn't a thing that I minded or cared about. So
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to wrap it up, Steve. I want to thank you so much. Steve's
yeah,
website is stevekalechman.com,
yeah,
Calechman.com. He does a variety of things. The articles are tremendous. And like I said, why I love them, they're not that long. They're right to the
yeah,
point. You had a great article on grandparenting. You had a great article on sleeping. It's all health related, and
yeah,
you don't have to be involved in youth sports or T-ball to go there. Now, Steve, do
yeah.
you have any sort of blog or mailing list people could sign up for
If
anywhere?
you go to the website. You also, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't have a mailing list, but LinkedIn, I have a lot of stuff on, and I'll be happy to uh, connect with anybody. So
Right. Okay.
yeah.
Steve, thank you so much. Don't stick around while I sign off. And
Okay.
you gave us some really good information. I
Thanks,
appreciate
Marty. It was great talking to you. Thanks for having me.
it. Okay.